May I, Mr. Deputy Speaker? May I? Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. So, of the three annual debates at the commencement of a year, the President's address, the Union budget, and the railway budget, I incline to the view that the debate on the Union budget is of central significance. I approach this task assigned to me by my party in the absence of my learned colleague, Sri Jaswant Singh, with restraint, a sense of responsibility, and a high personal regard for the Honourable the Finance Minister. I defer, sir. I defer, sir, Mr. Finance Minister. I defer, sir, I will say again, Mr. Finance Minister, to your years, your experience in government, but whereas I defer to all that, permit me to differ with you on some of views, more especially the central purpose and focus of this important document of fiscal policy. I am at loss, sir, to grasp what is the central point that you, with all your experience, are trying to deliver to the country. What is the focus that you wish the nation to address to? Is it a reversion to command economy? Is it that you are reasserting the need for a socialist economy? Or are you placing the public sector bank back on the commanding heights of the economy? I am unable to discern that central purpose, not because, sir, I am deficient in understanding, but because I do hold that this very important document, which comes only once a year, and which is a statement of the fiscal policy of the government, it is this document that is deficient in conveying to us what this is. Why has this happened? I personally feel, sir, that there are far too many economists in this government. I believe that there are more economists infesting this government than any other government since independence. Then if, despite all these economists, all this is happening, then a very serious question is begged. Now there is, the Honourable the Finance Minister is fully familiar with this saying about too many cooks. But these too many cooks are not simply spoiling the broth, Mr. Finance Minister. They are actually not letting the broth to be cooked. And that is why we suffer this deficiency. The budgetary speech that you so eloquently and at such length made is adrift. There are too many demands being placed on it. And therefore, because you're putting too many ingredients into the speech, forgive me for pointing out, it really gets nowhere. So recently, I cite something which I read from James Wilson, who was a very noted investigator of American society. He died on the 2nd of March this year. He had taught in Harvard University for 26 years about government. He was a prolific writer, and he was proudest of those items that he investigated the workings of the government. In my own humble way, sir, I too am an investigator of the functionings of government. I share this passion with late James Wilson, and when I examine this document or other aspects, sir, I investigate flawed, hopelessly disjointed, shambling efforts of our government to balance budgets, to run railways, manage coalitions, attend to the demands of an obstreperous parliament, ensure fiscal prudence, all very big goals, all accompanied by bigger boasts, and all, Mr. Finance Minister, on your able shoulders. Now, I wish there were more ministers to share your responsibilities, so that all these burdens, along with the burden, I'm told you had to even draft the reply of the Honourable the Railway Minister.
I am already overburdened. Don't add to my burden.
That is why, sir, I marvel at your government. I marvel at your government that despite all your efforts, it is still working. That is why also, sir, quite often, before I end the day, I ask myself a question. Is it a government or an illusion? And most of the time I incline to the view that the government now, sir, that we have the benefit of working under is not just an illusion, it is only a notion. And therefore, sir,
disillusioned.
Here there is no illusion.
Disillusioned with you.
yes, sir. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, my good friend Pawan Kumarji Bansal is making a very philosophical point because सभी कुछ माया है. ये illusion है, तो ये भी illusion है. So that is why I submit, Mr. Finance Minister, sir, and you would admit I'm not being rude when I say it, that we are now having to suffer a government that is condemned to perpetual crises, one crisis after another. The other day I said, sir, and I said it in all sincerity, we want you to succeed. I personally am committed to your success because we believe that if you succeed, it's good for the country. But Mr. Finance Minister, sir, your government seems determined. We want you to succeed, but your government seems determined not to succeed. Now, how, therefore, are we to address this problem? You said, sir, the other day, in a different context, that you have managed your coalition much better than we managed. I'm not in a competition of coalition management, but if this is an example of managing coalition very well, तो मुबारक है आपको. आप इसी रास्ते चले जाइए और दिक्कतें हमारी बढ़ जाएंगी.
आसान हो जाएगी.
आसान भी हो सकती है.
हमारी आसान हो जाएगी.
Sir, I wish to add, because I've had the benefit of performing just this function which the Honourable the Finance Minister is now performing. You have, of course, performed it with much greater ability than I can possibly command, and also for longer. I think, if I recollect right, sir, I have had the honour and the benefit of presenting 3 or 4 budgets. I first had the same job for a short period in 1996, and thereafter, from 2000 onwards, 2002, I think. Now, I want to share with you for a minute the story of what I call a reluctant finance minister. So this job that you today have is a key ministry. And I'm very glad that you are back in this job after a long gap. We have, Honorable Finance Minister, sir, you and I, we've worked together in Parliament for 63 years. I was counting here. It's a very long period, sir. And we have shared many experiences and many ups and downs. But I tell you with candor and honesty that I was assigned a job to perform in the South Block. And one day, Honorable Shilalji Advani called me on the telephone because Prime Minister Vajpayee always assigns such tasks to Advani. He called Advani and said, tell Jaswant Singh to move from South to North Block. तो अडवाणी जी ने हमको टेलीफोन किया, जसवंत सिंह जी आपको नॉर्थ ब्लॉक जाना है. जैसे राजस्थान की हमारी पद्धति है, हमने कहा हुकुम. 8 दिन बीत गए, 10 दिन बीत गए. मेरे दोस्त मुझे टेलीफोन कर करके कहें, कुछ दोस्तों ने विलायत से भी टेलीफोन किया, Jaswant, where are you going? You don't even know the vocabulary of finance. I admit it, I don't know. करीब 12 दिन जब बीत गए, अडवाणी जी ने फिर कहा कि भाई आप गए नहीं. फिर लोगों ने कहा भी that it is very bad policy to keep arguing with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister for more than 10-12 days. So I chose discretion to be the better part of my resistance, and I walked across from South to North Block. As is usual, sir, there was a lot of press that had collected at the entrance of North Block, and immediately, I hadn't given that, immediately they asked me, what is your policy? On the spur of the moment, Mr. Finance Minister, because it was central to our concerns and my conviction, I shared with them just 2 sentences. गरीब गृहिणी की टुकिया में आना, गरीब के पेट में दाना. And that became and remained the central focus of my approach as a finance. I think centrally, this continues to be your approach. This continues to be the approach, has to be the approach. And if I were to elaborate, Grihani ki tukiya mein ana. As you know, begging on the leader of the opposition's pardon, women have a tactile sense of money, sir. So therefore, they keep money in their tukiya. Now, you must, the essence of what I was trying to say is, you must provide more spending power to the household, to the housewife, to the citizens. And spending power is a derivative of income exceeding expenditure, income not being eaten away by inflation, sufficient income so as to enable citizens to have the luxury of spending money. You cannot imagine, I'm sure you can, what a great freedom is felt when a citizen is able to put his hand in his pocket or in the purse as a housewife and to be able actually to spend money on that. ये बहुत बड़ी चीज होती है. It's not easy to achieve. I do not minimize your difficulty, but this was one of them. और दूसरा था गरीब के पेट में दाना. A citizen or countrymen and women are entitled, Mr. Finance Minister, to affordable food that these two tasks I had assigned to myself as the central purpose of my responsibility as finance minister. Why, sir? Because I believe that the combination of these two results in what I call gross national contentment. And gross national contentment to me, personally, is infinitely more important than an empty figure like GDP. And Mr. Finance Minister, citizens cannot eat GDP. But gross national contentment provides the impetus to what I call the enthusiasm of animal spirits. And I do also believe that animal spirits in economic management of a country are a factor that are important and must be promoted. I share with you, Mr. Finance Minister, sir, and other honourable members, that it is my belief, and I had then as Finance Minister also shared it with the House, then I don't know whether I shared it with the House, but certainly with many others, that I believe that there is a basic, fundamental Indian economic philosophy that we have not given emphasis to, because we are far too persuaded by thoughts of the West, economic thinkers and philosophers who are very worthy. But there is a fundamental Indian economic philosophy which I think it merits us to recollect, to re-imbibe. It's very simple. It has only 4 or 5 elements. And those 4 or 5 elements are, sir, that it is every citizen of this nation, this country, no matter what profession he pursues, is enjoined by dharma to produce the maximum that he can. It is our requirement. Dharma, I don't mean the ritual of worship. By dharma, I mean the requirement enjoined as a citizen's duty to the nation, to the soil, to this dharti. We must produce the maximum that we can. चाहे वो काश्तकार हो, कारीगर हो, जो कुछ भी आप काम करते हो, produce the maximum and produce the best quality we have forgotten. This was our innate Indian cultural attribute of economic philosophy. The second, we must share. I remember in my childhood, and I know you must have. I know the traditions of Bengal, certainly not as well as you. But that even when we sit down to eat, we were told as children, put this aside for the cow, put this aside for the birds. This was the concept of sharing. We have forgotten this. I try and re-imbibe these thoughts because we cannot be a Western country. We are India, we have to remain Indian, and we will be Indian only when we revive what is essentially ours. The third used to be save. Don't use, eat, spend a penny more than you need. Again, I share something autobiographical. Whenever I had to come to Delhi or go from Delhi, I would take some little, जिसे हम राजस्थान में संभाल कहते हैं, संभाल लेके जाता था अपनी to my widowed mother. She would unwrap the paper, undo the twine, fold the paper, fold the twine and put it under her pillow. And if I asked her, why are you doing this? Why do you want to save the twine? एक जूट की डोरी का टुकड़ा है, this piece of paper. She would say, क्या मालूम फिर काम आ जाए. This was the innate, not that there was any lack of trying or paper, to save. We have become, Mr. Finance Minister, not a saving-oriented economy, but we are becoming a consumerist economy, to which point I will return in a moment. So the only other thing she would ever tell me, which I find very difficult now to explain, she would ask me, बेटे जा रहे हो, शस्त्र तो है. Shastar for us in Rajasthan, the good Minister of State of Finance from Rajasthan, he would understand what I am saying. Shastar for us was a personal and is a personal adornment. It's not a weapon of offense. And if she said, Shastar to leke ja rahe ho, she was not asking me to violate any arms law. She was only asking me to be, perhaps I am a traditionalist, sir, but I believe that in these traditions that I am simply pointing out lay great strengths of India. And why do I re-emphasize these? Because these strengths are the vital forces which run through our arteries and veins like the re-energizing blood of India. We cannot forget these. And the final two other points, which I think are part of it, charity. It was only India that had and continues to have, until it was ruined, was the concept of Gupta Dan. Now, Gupta Dan was ours. But I accept, Mr. Finance Minister, because I faced this problem. A lot of very clever businessmen use Gupta Dan to convert taxable money into non-taxable money, which we redesignated as white money and black money. It's a great shame. But why did this come? Because we brought about a taxation regime, and I remember, if you'd permit me, and yet another recollection, a very illustrious finance minister, a very illustrious Indian, who was a finance minister, late Sri Jaswant Singh. Now, he's a very eminent Indian, a great citizen of the country. In his time, sir, we had a tax regime of income tax and wealth tax that had gone at one time to 113%. Middle-class housewives, law-abiding citizens, all of them were converted into thieves. They would go abroad, go to Dubai, hide gold in the folds of their saris and come back. Why have a tax system that converts law-abiding citizens? It is this I wish to reintroduce the importance of charity in our national life. And one more point I wish to share. So these are part of our traditional thinking. गुजरात में मुझे नहीं मालूम ये कहावत प्रचलित है या नहीं. I say it in the vernacular, Mr. Finance Minister, because the music of the saying is in the vernacular. जहाँ राजा व्यापारी, तहाँ प्रजा भिखारी. It's a very eminent saying. The state must not ever become a trader. Increasingly, I don't mean the state, increasingly we find the tendency of the state to become a grasping trader or agents of the state. And if we permit those that hold office or are in a position to do so, to start trading for personal benefit, then the citizenry shall be pauperized. So I will not persist with that. I'll come to your speech proper. I do not wish to read out, not your speech, reread, or even to define the parameters, but I have tried to condense what you said in your speech, plus what was contained in the economic survey, which is otherwise a fine document. Because whatever the finance minister is unable to contain in his speech always goes there. So the survey, sir, the economic survey, so the economic survey very briefly is optimistic on growth improving in the coming year and also in the year after that. It also identifies, and quite rightly, fiscal consolidation as the central challenge ahead, so as to revive investment, growth, and to contain aggregate demand, because if aggregate demand is not contained, then it has that not containing it has two fallout effects. What they are the index of inflation going up and the current account deficit widening. The survey called, these are all eminently acceptable and reasonable. The survey also calls for getting energy prices right. Again, who can dispute this? But it's easier said than done to get energy prices right, so that the losses in the technical and commercial losses in the power sector are reduced. It is a very big. But what the survey fails to identify, and which I'm sorry, sir, that you too, as the finance minister, do not really identify, because survey cannot display political courage, we expect it out of you, is decontrol of fuels. Mr. Finance Minister, sir, coming here, these days, when I compare these days with the earlier days of Parliament, this is my 9th term, sir, now, when I first used to come, the kinds of limousines today that crowd the Parliament or crowd the streets of Delhi persuade me to recommend to you, Mr. Finance Minister, please increase petrol prices straight away. You have increased petrol prices a few times earlier and have met with a considerable amount of hue and cry against that. But I have not seen any reduction whatsoever in the traffic on the roads of Delhi or in the roads of the kind of limousines that come to the Parliament. Along with that, sir, for long you will not be able to now resist because of obvious reasons. I don't want to labor the point of why you can't resist petrol price hike, the international situation, Iran, etc. But you cannot also resist doing so for diesel. This is not a politically popular point, but it's economically and fiscally a vital point. But you also simultaneously, and that is a requirement that states must cooperate, is to stamp out power theft. Power theft in the country is rampant, except some states. And if you continue to steal power, we will always be short of power. So investment has also suffered, which is an account which quite rightly the survey points out, as indeed your speech also indicates. But in addition to that, sir, may I point out how decision-making is almost at a standstill. And why is decision-making at a standstill? Because there's been a kind of there's been an outbreak of, what else can I call it? Outbreak of scandals and scams and corruption cases, with the result that all civil servants, all, without exception, they have taken recourse to a very easy course, which is to not take any decisions whatsoever. If you do not take decisions, then certainly you cannot make mistakes. But it's Finance Minister, sir, either a political community or a civil service that withdraws itself, as the survey points out, not in these words, but certainly indicating it withdraws into a shell of inertia, and that, permit me to point out, testifies indisputably to a weak leadership, weak political leadership. The fiscal consolidation that it has achieved has been pointed out, but here I would like to say you ought to see very carefully and compare what the states have achieved, which I shall revert to in a minute, as compared to what the centre is doing. So I won't label what the survey says because it's your document, you know it very well. The inflation is a tax which again I must underline here before coming to again. Now, this survey, a brief review of this survey and the issues that brings us to the issues that are contained in the fiscal document of your budget presentation. That again I ask, sir, what is the central thought that is inspired by your statement of fiscal policy? It is fiscal consolidation and deficit. Now, you know very well, sir, that the total deficit we are talking of, centre and state, crosses 9%. At about 9% of fiscal deficit, it is a ruinous state. You cannot refute the logic, the economic logic of such high and unsustainable fiscal deficit for a subcontinent like India, which is in reality a continental economy. But here I submit to you, sir, as I just hinted earlier, permit me to point out that the states have actually performed better than the centre is performing. The aggregate of the states informs me that they have concentrated on capital accounts. They have it examined, Mr. Finance. Whereas the centre seems to be concentrating on consumption and revenue accounts. I earnestly address you for an examination of this and for a correction of it. The state fiscal deficits have come down. They are concentrating on capital account, and the centre is concentrating on consumption. It ought to be the other way around. This is a... So I wish also to point out one other great deficiency of the centre, which is credibility. No government can deliver goods and manage the economy of a country unless it has credibility. So there is an erosion of national confidence. I don't say it only as good, because events are criticizing it. There is an erosion of national confidence because there is a great fall from the government in the criteria of truth-telling. Please tell us the truth. When we point out issues, it's not only to find fault, because unless we examine issues truthfully, we cannot move forward. Let's speak, sir, of animal spirits. I wish to talk, the issue of taxation ought really to be addressed in the discussion on finance bill. That's how I address this question. Larger issues of economic management are what we address in debate on the budget or the finance minister's speech. But if there is one issue that I wish to point out, that's about retrospective legislation. Now, I don't for a moment deny your government or any government. If there is X, Y, or Z with a liability of about 10,000 crores of taxes, no government can lightly take such a tax liability lightly. And therefore the need arises. I'm very sorry. What I urge you, sir, to examine, I'm told, perhaps I'm wrong on figures, This is not an advocacy of any one particular case or another. This is an advocacy of the principle of it. I'm told, sir, that in this budget there are about 17 instances of retrospective legislation. That is, if it will be correct that there are, then it's a profligate number. Secondly, that is the aspect, having conceded the government's right to recover what is obviously wrong. It's every government's right, and the government must do it. But there is a simultaneous moral hazard in this. If you apply this to corporate bodies, law will require you to apply it to individuals. And corporate bodies have more fat, individuals have less fat. That is why, whereas please do go and collect taxes which you believe legitimately to be the dues of the government, please address this question also from the angle of the moral hazard that citizens will face. So I go to what I think is a critical challenge for the country. The other day we had a debate here, impromptu, on poverty figures. I'll come back to this question in a minute with agriculture, but the essential, central quest of any government in India has to be not just lowering of poverty figures, actually to eliminate the dehumanizing quotient of poverty. Rather than repeat everything here, let me leave this thought here only to revert. But agriculture. I submit to you, sir, कृषि, agriculture. कृषि, अध्यक्ष जी, भारत में मात्र जीविका उपार्जन का साधन नहीं है. कृषि एक जीवन शैली है. ये केवल भारत ही में जीवन शैली है. इट इज कृषि. कृषि से ही हमारे सांस्कृतिक व्यवहार, हमारे त्योहार, हमारे गीत गायन सब कृषि से उपजते हैं. इसको केवल जीविका उत्पादन, इसीलिए तो कहावत है उत्तम खेती मध्यम बाण अदम चाकरी भीख निदान. कृषि is central to India. It is central not economically, where it is just about 15.1% of the GDP contributed. It is central because it has given, not because, also because almost 3/4 of India lives in villages, but it is central because it is the fountainhead of our cultural consciousness. Now, I just said, sir, that though it gives about 15.7% of the GDP, that's what it gave in 2009-10. It's about half of our cost, 52.1%. But we have, Mr. Deputy Chairman, the largest cattle wealth in the world. We have the largest arable landmass in the world, more than the United States of America, almost twice that of the China. We are about 288 million hectares. China is really what the Chinese paintings depict, about 144 million. We have second largest number of sheep, camel, goat. This is all wealth. And yet, sir, it's a matter of great disappointment to me that in terms of production per acre or per hectare, or production per cow, head of cow, or production of wool per sheep, we are very low. I have often pointed out, and a very eminent former Chief Minister of Himachal, very eminent minister of this government who is sitting here, he would accept what I say. almost 65% of the horticulture produce of Himachal rots either on the trees or on the ground. Number of times, number of governments have spoken of warehousing facilities, cold storage. This is all India's wealth that goes waste. Now, I could keep on emphasizing the importance of agriculture, but this is not a discussion on the Ministry of Agriculture, and I can only indicate in points the Honourable, what I think is vital in agriculture. The Honourable Finance Minister gave us figures saying that the total agriculture credit for 12-13 will be increased to 5,75,000 crore.
1 lakh
By 1 lakh. I submit, sir, that all these figures that we have, and I have done the same thing, not that I was any better. We have done the same thing. It's not the quantum increase that matters. What matters is the application of that money in terms of real return. So I point out to you, sir, that there are roughly, please correct me if my figure is wrong, if you are talking of credit, there are roughly 12 crore farmers in the country who are loan seekers, and of that, only 5.5 crore farmers have actually got loans. Not even 50% of the farmers have loans. I have pointed out that what we need, sir, yes, the revolution of the 60s brought us high-yielding varieties in rice, and in wheat, it expanded the use of irrigation. But in expanded use of irrigation, we went into profligate water usage, like flood irrigation. अगर मैं कहूँ ये सब मैंने अपने हाथों से किया हुआ है. आज भी गायें पालता हूँ. थरपार कर गायों का 50 गायों का मेरा टोला आज भी मेरे गांव में है. मैं घोड़े भी रखता हूँ, शौक से भी रखता हूँ क्योंकि घोड़ों का प्रेमी भी हूँ. मैंने अपने हाथों से, डिप्टी स्पीकर साहब, हल खड़ा है बैल के पीछे. मैंने अपने हाथों से हल जोता है, खेत खड़ा है, कुएं की अरट पर बैठ करके पानी सींचा. एक किसी साहब ने, oh, some note has come to me, I don't know why it has come. सुषमा जी शायद आपके लिए हो. So I was, the requirement in agriculture is about soil erosion, soil salination, most economical usage of water, where flood irrigation is not the answer. The average high-yield variety in India today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, is generally 30 to 50% lower than the average high-yield variety of rice, for example, in China, and about half of that in Vietnam or Indonesia. We continue to be short, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, today of the Finance Minister knows we are net importers of lentil. It's the largest provider of protein. We are also net importers of vegetable oil. This is the only country, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which culturally and civilizationally will not, cannot use animal fat. And that being a reality, that today, 63 years after independence, we still continue to have to import vegetable oil. We are not self-sufficient. If for us, the principal protein requirement comes from lentil, and we still have to import lentil, I don't have to point out why agriculture is so important. Sir, I will share some very disturbing, troubling figures to me about poverty. These are World Bank statistics. I know the World Bank has, I know the World Bank. I'm familiar with its means. I also know their statistics. 75.6% of our population, this is as of 2005, 75.6% of the population lives on less than $2 per day on the purchasing power parity criteria. 41.6% of the population is living below the new international line of poverty, which is also on PPP, of $1.25. The data that has been released by the Government of India on poverty figures resulted in a discussion and a debate here. The issue, sir, is not what the figures of poverty are. The central issue remains that there is poverty which is appalling, which is unacceptable, and a poverty that is degrading and dehumanizing. It is for many, many reasons, amongst which, so far as the farmer is concerned, a study has also established that a farmer receives only about 1/5 or 20% of what ultimately is sold, the grain is sold in the shops. The farmer is recipient only of 20% of that. So these figures ought to tell us effectively enough. Otherwise, of course, I could persist and I could speak for long on agriculture, but that is not today's purpose. I go, sir, I have about 10 minutes. I'll try and finish on that. So I have some parochial points. By parochial, I say parochial because they are issues of personal interest to me. One is the army. The second is the... I say parochial because they are issues of personal interest to me. One is the army. The second is the desert. And the third are the mountains which have so kindly sent me here. What, sir, is... to be well asked, and I will attempt to answer, what is my view as to what India ought to be? We must be a modern, a self-reliant, and a self-confident national economy that competes at the best globally. We must have a happy and a contented citizenry, eliminate poverty for this, and enthuse the citizenry with animal spirit. For this, rural development is vital. I appeal to you, Finance Minister, sir. I agree that you have political differences with us, but some of the programs that were introduced by NDA government for rural development were eminently sensible. One of them was provision of urban resources and facilities for rural areas, PURA. Please re-examine that program. It's a very good program. It subserves the purpose of rural areas very well. Don't reject it only because we had introduced it. The second thought I leave with you, because I cannot keep speaking for all the time. You must, sir, address to the challenge of reversing the investment flow out of the country back into the country. If you examine the figures for the last year, I have rough figures which I don't want to cite. If you examine you will find that more money has gone out of India by Indian investors investing abroad than has come into India as investment. I think this tendency is telling us something. Why are Indian investors going out rather than investing in India? This is a challenge to the management of our economy by the finance ministry. Of course, there are many causes to it. Of course, land acquisition. Of course, the absolute obstinacy of a system in early grant of sanctions and permissions. And money is like water. It finds the area of least resistance and it flows to that. I'm not suggesting that you block that route. Not at all. It reflects and demonstrates the entrepreneurial spirit of India, but try and divert that spirit back into the country, not outside of the country. I cite this because perhaps you intended through your budgetary document. I did not find it, therefore I underlined it. Sir, I do again repeat, GDP figures are very important, but the conversion of GDP figures into figures of national contentment is the vital quest. GDP figures by themselves cannot feed India, cannot give contentment to India. This is a challenge that all of us have to address. I have a request here. The Ganga and the Jamuna are the lifelines of India. They are the arteries of our civilizational progress. Certainly from late Rajiv Gandhi as Prime Minister's days, I've been hearing of the need for reviving, cleaning up Ganga, cleaning up Yamuna. This languishes. I request you, Mr. Finance Minister, if necessary, do what you will, constitute what authority or power or committee or whatever comprising of this Parliament, members of Parliament or whoever, but please address to the health of these two rivers with which the core of India, the civilization of India, what we say, Ganga, Jamuni, etc., is all identified. So on deficits, the control of fiscal deficit and subsidies, I don't want to elaborate the point, except to submit to you that not fully digested and examined concepts of welfareism, which we import from West Europe or wherever, might not be the most suitable methods. Like Manrega was introduced, I have seen. And I'm sure Honorable Naman Jibina has seen with his own eyes. Overnight, sarpanch in villages have become enormously rich. कहाँ से पैसा आ गया? ये मनरेगा का पैसा है। इमारतें खड़ी हो गई। मैं अभी किसको कह रहा था अगले दिन, मैं अभी बाड़मेर में गया, मेरा जिला है इसमें, वहाँ एक कोई सज्जन मुझसे मिलने आए, नमोनारायण जी समझेंगे, वो मोटरसाइकिल पर बैठ के आ रहे, मोटरसाइकिल की पिछली सीट पर बैठे थे, कोई आगे चला रहा था। कभी तुम कब से मोटरसाइकिल पर बैठने लगे? उनका सर मैंने खरीदी है मोटरसाइकिल, पर मैं चला नहीं सकता था तो एक ड्राइवर रखा है मोटरसाइकिल। ये गलत नहीं चला, इससे क्या बताओ का नाम बता दूं आपको। ये मनरेगा की देन है, मनरेगा की फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर साहब एक और देन है। यू हैव अनइंटेंडेडली you have totally क्या लफ्ज़ यूज करूँ which is not too rude, you have totally perverted the labor system in the country, whether industrial or agriculture. This is a very serious fault, sir. This is a very serious flaw. It is unintended flaw. It is a consequence of this introduction of rural employment. I have seen with my own eyes village women going there, sitting by the roadside in some shade. हमारे यहाँ shade भी कम मिलता है, and वो 2-1 घंटे बैठी रहती हैं, घर चली जाती हैं। सरपंच कहता है कि तुम्हें 100 रुपये देने, 700 रुपये, आधे मैं लूँगा, आधे तू। वो गृहिणी कहती है भाई आधे तू ले ले, मुझे क्या करना, वहीं बैठ के वापस आ रही। भी है वो ये यूपी की देन है. UP always improves on what we do. Sir, I appeal to you. Like, for example, please re-examine the question of food. We had, in the Janata government days, introduced a very good scheme, which was Antyodaya,
Food for work.
which was food for work. In the great drought of 2003, sir, when I had a responsibility and a job, I'm rather jobless now, so I can say all these things. But in 2003, sir, I have myself seen, and Namo Narayan ji would bear witness, in the households of Rajasthan, जिन्होंने गेहूं का दाना नहीं देखा था, उन घरों में 30-30 किलो गेहूं पड़ा रहता. And the prices have been depressed. Please at least re-examine. This was not a bad scheme. Antyodaya was not a bad scheme, because whoever was to be benefited was selected by the village itself. The state had very little to it. I leave that only as a thought, sir. So in inflation, I submit, Mr. Finance Minister, sir, Mr. Deputy Chairman, I won't take long. I'm coming to the end. In inflation, sir, it's if I might use an American phrase, on the citizen, it's now a triple whammy. The triple whammy comes by shortages. On top of shortages, because you've spoken of supply side glitches, on top of shortages comes governmental inefficiencies. And on top of that, corruption in systems. So shortages, governmental inefficiencies, corruptions and petty corruption. I share a thought with everybody. This morning we read accounts of 10 lakh crore or something. Now, so it's very difficult to conceive. How many zeros for that 10 lakh crore? The money becomes notional. This kind of suggestion of corruption, believe me, I shared it with them, doesn't really affect the citizen, the common citizen. What affects him is, if he goes to the Patwari, and Patwari to give him a certificate says, nahi, 100 rupees nikalo. That corruption pinches much more than figures that we cite. It's this petty corruption that is cruelly killing. On inflation, this petty corruption, shortages, all these become a kind of triple whammy, and more particularly on rural population, more particularly on the poor. I come to the recommendation, sir. This was my parochial step, I had introduced, when I had the job that you hold with so much greater distinction, I'd introduced a measure of pasture development. West Rajasthan is really animal husbandry oriented economy. And I had introduced a measure for developing the pastures of West Rajasthan, जिन्हें हम ओरण कहते हैं. I am so saddened to say, sir, that when I was thrown out of office and your party came into office, among the steps that you took was to stop the pasture development. What wrong have we done? Pasture development will go to Ladakh also. Pasture development will take care of Himachal pastures also. Please look at that. Sir, for the mountains, I have two requests. Because I represent them, therefore I say, three requests. Consider, please, granting to them, for a limited purpose of time, the same benefits that you gave, which the Prime Minister gave to northeast of India or to the state, so that for 30 years, what was the consequence of neglect of the health can be revived. Communications and highways. So the state of the highways in Darjeeling district are such, they are notional now. They are called national highways, but I call them notional highways. They are hardly means of communication. And the railway line, which is a great railway line, it is inherited, that has also collapsed in the recent earthquake. Please address me, sir. I'm concluding, Mr. Chairman. Please, I appeal to you, let us not revert to a state of command economy. Let the spirit of India flower, let it become productive. Let our economy not become state-centric, let it please be citizen-centric. Let it be for India, not for the government of India, nor for any party. Sir, I do submit we must move away from this frenziedly consumerist economy and society that we seem to have developed. I'm told every day by my children and grandchildren, this mall and that mall. I'm sure, but I would much rather that in my villages we had no malls, but much more mall. If we had mall but no mall, I would be very happy. Sir, I request you to remember, not long back, there was an old man who wore only a loincloth, and he used to walk all over India, quite often on foot. He was called Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. And he had said, the soul of India resides in our villages. Mr. Finance Minister, sir, he was the first advocate of Swadeshi. That is the real Swadeshi. And I appeal to you, because you can do it. I know, as a person, and having worked with you for this, more than 3 decades, 3 plus 3 decades, please revive this spirit. This is the central core for the development of India. So I'm concluding, Mr. Chairman. So the most important reform that India needs today is firstly a reform of the mindset. This is a vital reform. I've said it earlier. When I had this responsibility, I repeat it. We then need a reform of governance, without which we will certainly fail to deliver to our citizens that which is their inalienable right, their due, and that which is our bounden duty to provide. Thirdly, and importantly, a political reform which must address the question of eliminating poverty, prevalent cynicism, and the corruption of spirit of conduct, and of somehow reimparting probity and rectitude in our public life, for which improving our political systems and ensuring that legislatures are able to perform their duty as mandated by the respective electorates. Mr. Finance Minister, sir, without this, we will not be able to address the central challenge that we face today: how to eliminate poverty, how to improve the quality of life of our citizens, and in late Jawaharlal Nehru's memorable words, to create a civilized society through civilized means and propel India to its destiny in the global community of nations. Without such a minimum program of reform, Honorable Finance Minister, forgive me if I say so, but budgetary proposals by themselves will not achieve the purpose. The challenge is not only fiscal or economical, it is critically political today.